are with our speakers for tonight, and there's some great questions that have been thrown in here. And so, Ray, let me start with you. One of the ways that you said a church shrinks is that when there's little or no vision. What if you're just fresh out of ideas, things feel stale, you feel like things have dried up? What do you do? How do you find fresh vision?
Yeah, I think number one is I understand God's always got a great future for me. So I would ask Him for new revelation, new things, new insights that come from heaven. It's really
It's in your prayer life.
It's in my prayer life, number one. But number two is that it's always important that we expose ourselves to people who are ahead of us, not to copy them. I found it's always dangerous to try and copy because we've got a different group of people. But when we expose ourselves to people who are ahead of us, maybe 3 or 4 steps, there are things that God can use to enlarge our hearts. Yeah. And when our heart is enlarged, comes enlarged vision, which we can come across.
So you're talking about going to visit, spend time with, talk to, read about them, that sort of thing?
That sort of thing. Yeah. It can be. If I look back in my life, probably I could count maybe on one hand people that have really deeply affected my vision. But I've exposed myself to those 5. Okay. And it's dangerous to expose yourself to 105.
Sure.
But I think God has key people that we can...
Great. Another question for you, Ray, is that you spoke about not being a dictator. The question is that to be a visionary, to be a leader, to be a church planter, you've sometimes got to make strong calls, you've got to lead strong. Where's the line, leading strong and being a dictator?
You know, Jesus was a strong leader, but he was a loving, strong leader. And I think that the foundation for good decisions of that strength needs to be come out of the questions we ask. What brings most glory to God and most help to people? It's not when we're just defending ourselves. And so we can make strong decisions when it's for God's glory and it's for people's good.
Yeah, great. So this question's probably aimed at me, so I'm going to answer it. And then, Ray, I think maybe you could have another crack at it because you've been a visionary for double the time that I have. But how do you identify activators? So one of the point I was making was that for you to keep your credibility as a visionary, you've got to have with you activators so that actually not just, talking pipe dreams, building castles in the sky. So... I've got a number of ways of doing that, is that I look at their private life. So if a man's or a woman's private world is constantly in a mess, things aren't attended to, balls are getting dropped, he's not an activator. He might, like to activate things in fits and starts, but he's not going to be helpful in the way that we've described it. In addition to that, I look at other people's relationship with them. Do they depend on them? So when I mean an activator, I'm saying someone who is responsible, someone you can depend on, and someone who says, when would you like me to do it? Most activators will have diaries, will have deadlines, and will give them themselves. Someone who can get a job done for you is helpful to have on a team. But the type of activators that I need to help you work with a vision are those who self-start, and you can generally see them in their private life. There are other tools that you can use, like the Myers-Briggs personality test and the Strength Finder test, looking at the way you lean, which are helpful tools that you could look up and look at. But I personally think you look at their private world. You're faithful with a little, he'll be entrusted with much. Faithful with his own stuff, you can trust him with eternal stuff. Ray, how else would you find an activator?
I think more or less in the same thing, but I found over the years that I will look for guys that I think there's a calling on. I will give them responsibilities, and then I watch how they handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they handled it well, with commitment, and I don't have to push and shove and phone up the whole time, I know that there's something of an activator there, and you can give more and more.
Great. Ray, you spoke about leaders blowing it with sin and that causing a church to stagnate. But the question is, what if there's a leader out there who hasn't dealt with something, sitting with it right now? What do you say that as a father in the faith, what do you say to that person on one of those three issues, the money one, the power one, or the sex one?
You know, it just never pays to hide sin. And so I think there is a wise way to do it. And this is why I think relationship with the translocal team is so important, particularly at a leadership level, particularly if you are the leader, is to be able to bring somebody responsible and then to deal with the issue. And I think we need to understand that as over the years, we've had to deal with serious issues, but the motivation that we've always had is always to try and see that person coming back again and stronger. Yeah. But if it's not dealt with, that person will start to shrink outside, live in guilt, and actually they will die slowly. It's much better to face it, go through the issue.
And when you say deal with it, you're saying confess, bring it out into the light.
Bring it out into the light.
And trust that person on that apostolic team is going to handle it biblically.
I think as an apostolic team, we've always been taught that at the end of the day, we're wanting to see people brought
Restored.
back again and restored.
Yeah, brilliant. One last one for you, and then we move over to the Millennial. Conflict in church leadership. What happens if you just keep having it? So in other words, it's become a pattern. You're the church planter, you're the visionary, you're the leader, and it just happens again and again. What would you say is wrong there?
Yeah, I think it probably needs somebody from the outside to gauge what the root problem is. Because if it's anything that recurs again and again, there's a root to that. And sometimes as a leader, we can't see it ourselves. We're doing our best, but there's a root there that, again, it might seem playing the same harp chord again. Relationship to translocal team can be so important, where somebody could come in where we know that team guy loves us, loves the church, loves the people, and can be objective and hear what the people are saying, and to be able to help deal with the very root of that recurring.
It's an amazing thing to me. I mean, Ray has been in ministry for 50 years, planted the church that I've got the privilege of being part of at the moment. And Ray, I know that this is your story, that back in 1983, when you had to deal with a big issue on your leadership team, you called in the translocal team. And it's something that I'm being really grateful for, that you set that as a value, that we're not an island, we don't live by ourselves. And when there's issues of what we believe or discipline or finances, that we live dependent on, interdependent with this team. And I've always felt very, very safe knowing that you have people speaking into your life and that you've set that up around us. And so it's amazing to me that has been something you've come back to on most of these critical issues, and it's a big one for pastors. Any last comment, Ray, before I move over to TK on that? That's fantastic. TK, I mean, you said glitz, glamour, didn't impress guys much, skeptical of, but the question is, what's the biggest turn-off to young people? I think it's probably been written by an old person, this question.
Yeah.
So, when an old bullet like me come in and starts to work with you and minister with you, what's the biggest turn-off?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think one of the things is trying too hard. I know it sounds weird, but trying too hard to be like, hey, we're trying to do everything for you. I'm not the person I am anymore. I'm wearing.
So if Ray, put skinny jeans on and cut those holes into those jeans, you wouldn't be impressed.
I'd be terrified. I like Ray how he is. He's perfect. But I think that the opposite is also true, where it's this like complete neglect and complete neglect to the point where there's just no space for young people to even thrive or just to go there. So I think there's that middle point basically where it's completely off the charts, inauthentic, trying to do everything, and then there's the other point where it's, hey, we don't care about you. This is what we're doing, and I think a lot of that also comes down to, hey, what does the makeup look like of who's on stage, who's at the door, who's on the teams, and things like that, which is really helpful.
Here's a great question. What would you say to a young guy who clashes with the older leaders?
So, I think the young people, and I remember when I first got saved, I had this issue, and I think that at the end of the day, there's a bridge that needs a trust bridge that needs to happen, and I think, and I know it sounds weird, but it's almost like points built up where it's be like, hey, we've built a bridge of trust. Here's my perspective. Here's what I honestly think. I think young people don't do themselves a service a lot of the time when they just come in and think, you guys are dumb, let's do this, let's do this. But it's a relationship. And I think once that relationship's built and there's a communitas, you've been through a few battles together on the front lines, I think that helps build trust for that next thing that comes up.
Yeah, that's great. And you sort of covered this question, but how young is too young to lead?
I think leadership starts as soon as someone responds to Jesus. And I think children can respond to Jesus. And I think there's obviously different levels of responsibility. But I think leadership starts as soon as someone can lead themselves. And then once they've led themselves, they can lead other people. So I don't think there's an age number on that.
Great.
When it comes to leadership.
Great. Yeah, that's been our story here, hasn't it? Seeing little guys, young guys. I had a dad say to me the other day, he's got a 12-year-old son and a 10-year-old son. And just the longing in his heart was that these guys would be given the microphone at the prayer meeting. And I thought, man, that is fantastic.
Yeah, I remember at that prayer meeting, I think it was a prayer meeting I was here. Is that it?
Yeah, he's dreaming about other prayer meetings.
Well, we had a prayer meeting here where we got 8 or 9-year-olds to pray. And I was so humbled by the end of it. I thought, my prayers are small. My prayers are tiny. And I remember getting up afterwards. I was like, well, everyone's prayed for the world, for the disease to go away. Everyone. And I think also young leaders can keep reminding us the bigger perspective.
Beautiful,
which is huge.
So here is a great question. And Ray, I think this sort of bleeds over into your area as well. So you said, DK, that they want to ask questions. These things are interactive. The platforms that they engage on are interactive. So this is the question. There are a lot of armchair theologians. So in other words, they've all got their own view, and they want to express it, and they want to challenge it. How subjective is theology? That's a cool question.
Cool. Didn't you say it's for Ray?
You going first. So with these young guys saying, I want to debate everything.
Yeah.
What's not up for debate?
I think a couple of things. I think when it comes to online, you have to say that it's amazing that Jesus never argued anyone into the kingdom. Never argued anyone into the kingdom. He loved people into the kingdom. And so you can quickly separate who's trying to stir something or who's genuinely asking questions about God. And I think a lot of people don't leave the church because, they disagreed theologically. A lot of it's got to do with a whole bunch of other things, but few people left the church because they didn't agree with something that Jesus said. So pointing people constantly back to Jesus, back to Jesus, back to Jesus, even if the debate goes on to, what happened in Genesis, who married who, whatever, if we keep pointing it back to Jesus, people need to fall in love with Jesus, not a logical argument. And I think we need constantly, especially with young people, constantly pointing them back that this is who Jesus is, this is what he's like. And I think that really helps distinguish people to say, hey, I trust in what Jesus said in his word, and that's what's truth for me. And once you understand that, it begins to unlock other parts of the Bible that you might have questions about.
That's a great point you make, particularly with Jesus not arguing someone into the kingdom. While you said it, I thought straight away of the Pharisees, because the Pharisees came with their questions to trick him, and often he was quite impolite, calling them all sorts of names. But then a Pharisee named Nicodemus came one night, at night, undercover, genuinely wanting to know about eternal life, and he gave him the answer.
Sure.
Amazing.
No, it's so true.
Oh, good answer, TK. Ray, have you got any other thought? What's up for debate with all this questioning that's going on?
Look, debate is not the real issue. What I look for is the attitude of heart. And then to understand that actually theology is not a mind concept, it's a life-changing concept.
Yeah,
and to bring it around to shaping their lives with the truth that's been taught, rather than just argue about it.